Does it really matter what we eat? Well, the good news is we have tremendous power over our health, destiny, and longevity. The majority of premature death and disability is preventable with a healthy enough diet. It's the food. Most deaths in the United States are preventable and related to nutrition. According to the most rigorous analysis of risk factors ever published, the Global Burden of Disease study funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the number one cause of death in the United States and the number one cause of disability is our diet, which has bumped tobacco smoking to number 2. Smoking now only kills 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills hundreds of thousands more. What we eat is the number one determinant of how long we live. What we eat is what determines most whether we'll die prematurely. What we eat is what determines most whether we become disabled or not. So if our diet is the number one cause of death and disability, if most deaths in the United States are preventable and related to nutrition, then obviously nutrition is the number one thing taught in medical school, right? Obviously, it's the number one thing your doctor talks to you about at every visit, right? Unfortunately, doctors suffer from a severe nutrition deficiency in education. Most doctors are just never taught about the impact healthy nutrition can have on the course of illness, and so they graduate without this powerful tool in their medical toolbox. Now, there's also institutional barriers, such as time constraints, lack of reimbursement. In general, doctors aren't paid for counseling people on how to take better care of themselves. Of course, drug companies also play a role in influencing medical education and practice. Ask your doctor when the last time they were taken out to dinner by Big Broccoli. Probably been a while. That's why I started nutritionfacts.org. It's the tool I wish I had in medical training. NutritionFacts.org is a free, nonprofit, science-based public service, providing daily updates on the latest in nutrition research via bite-sized videos. There are videos on more than 2,000 health and nutrition topics, all free, with new videos and articles uploaded every day on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. Fruits and vegetables are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, and dark green leafy vegetables lead the pack. Each of the top 5 so-called powerhouse fruits and vegetables were greens. And so if we blend them up in a smoothie, or soup, or sauce, we're taking the food with the most nutrition and breaking all those cell walls to dump that nutrition into our bloodstream. Chewing is good, but blending is better in terms of digestive efficiency and absorbing nutrients. But if we suck up all that nutrition such that none of it makes it down to our colon, might we be starving our microbial selves? The reason intact grains, beans, and nuts are better than bread, hummus, and nut butters is that no matter how well we chew, intact food particles make it down to your colon, where they can offer a smorgasbord for your good bacteria. But if your grains, beans, and nuts are finely ground up into flour or paste before you eat it, you may be leaving your gut flora high and dry. Would the same be true for fruits and vegetables? There are special classes of phytonutrients in fruits and vegetables that appear to protect against colon cancer. They can escape digestion and absorption in our stomach and small intestine and end up in our colon to act as prebiotics. No matter how much we chew, they stay attached to the fiber. But if we use a blender, might we prematurely detach these nutrients? No. Even if you blend the high-speed blender for 5 minutes, they remain bound to the fiber for transport down to your colon bacteria. You can do smoothie experiments on people with ileostomy bags that drain the contents of the small intestine and show that most of the polyphenol phytonutrients make it out intact. So we don't have to worry we may be robbing Peter to pay Paul when we blend fruits and vegetables. Is there any downside to smoothies then? Well, just a smaller particle size may improve digestive efficiency and gastrointestinal absorption of nutrients from fruits and vegetables. The same may be true for grains, but the concern is that this could boost starch availability and cause a blood sugar spike. For example, here's the rise and fall in our blood sugar in the 4 hours after eating a half cup of brown rice, eliciting a nice, gentle bump in our insulin levels to take care of it. It doesn't even go above normal fasting blood sugar levels. But what if we ate the same amount of brown rice, but first ground into brown rice flour, so like a cream of brown rice hot cereal? You get twice the blood sugar, twice the insulin spike. Same amount of food, just in a different form. Another reason why intact whole grains, are better than just whole grain flour products. Even just chewing really well can boost the glycemic and insulin response. Here's if you just chew rice regularly, and here's if you chew really well. The smaller rice particles empty out of your stomach faster, producing greater blood sugar and insulin responses. It's ironic that there were health crusaders pushing people to chew more to digest their food better, but if what you're chewing is a 5-cheese pizza, maybe it's better not to digest so well. Some have even suggested that diabetics and obese persons not chew their food so much. Swallowing diced food without chewing would not only reduce the pleasure of eating, though, but people could choke on it. Still, though, they suggest could be a simple way to allow patients to reduce their blood sugar levels without fundamentally altering their diets, and may thus prove more acceptable than having to do the unthinkable, eat high-fiber foods like beans, which have been shown to blunt blood sugar spikes. Even blended beans like hummus? Yes, unlike grains, blending legumes does not affect their glycemic response. So, circling back to the smoothie question, is fruit more like grains or more like beans? If you liquefy fruit in a blender to make a smoothie, do you risk spiking your blood sugar too high? We'll find out. The dietary guidelines recommend that we try to choose meals or snacks that are high in nutrients but lower in calories to reduce the risk of chronic disease. By this measure, the healthiest foods on the planet, the most nutrient-dense, are vegetables, containing the most nutrient bang for our caloric buck. So what would happen if a population centered their entire diet around vegetables? They might end up living among the longest lives in the world. Of course, anytime you hear about long-living populations, you have to make sure it's validated, as it may be hard to find birth certificates from the 1890s. But validation studies suggest that indeed, they really do live that long. The traditional diet in Okinawa is based on vegetables, beans, and other plants. I'm used to seeing the Okinawan diet represented like this, the base being vegetables, beans, and grains, but a substantial contribution from fish and other meat. But a more accurate representation would be this. If you look at their actual dietary intake, we know what they're eating from the U.S. National Archives, because the U.S. military ran Okinawa until it was given back to Japan in '72. And if you look at the traditional diets of more than 2,000 Okinawans, this is how it breaks down. Only 1% of their diet was fish. Less than 1% of their diet was meat, and same with eggs and dairy. So it was more than 96% plant-based, and more than 90% whole food plant-based, very few processed foods either. And not just whole food plant-based, but most of their diet was vegetables, and one vegetable in particular, sweet potatoes. The Okinawan diet was centered around purple and orange sweet potatoes. How delicious is that? Could have been bitter gourd or soursop, but no, sweet potatoes. So, 90+% whole food plant-based makes it a highly anti-inflammatory diet, makes it a highly antioxidant diet. If you measure the level of oxidized fat within their system, there's compelling evidence of less free radical damage. Maybe they're just genetically have better antioxidant enzymes or something? No. Their antioxidant enzyme activity is the same. It's all the extra antioxidants they're getting from their diet that may be making the difference. Most of their diet is vegetables. So, 8 to 12 times fewer heart disease deaths than the U.S. You can see they ran out of room for the graph for our death rate. 2 to 3 times fewer colon cancer deaths, 7 times fewer prostate cancer deaths, and 5.5 times lower risk of dying from breast cancer. Some of this protection may be because they're only eating about 1,800 calories a day, but they were actually eating a greater mass of food, but the whole plant foods are just calorically dilute. There's also a cultural norm not to stuff oneself. The plant-based nature of the diet may trump the caloric restriction, though, since the one population that lives even longer than the Okinawa Japanese don't just eat a 98% meat-free diet, they eat 100% meat-free. The Adventist vegetarians in California, with perhaps the highest life expectancy of any formerly described population. Adventist vegetarian men and women lived to be about 83 and 86, comparable to Okinawan women, but better than Okinawan men. The best of the best were Adventist vegetarians who had healthy lifestyles too, like exercising non-smokers, 87 and nearly 90 on average. That's like 10 to 14 years longer than the general population. 10 to 14 extra years on this earth from simple lifestyle choices. And this is happening now, in modern times, whereas Okinawan longevity is now a thing of the past. Okinawa now hosts more than a dozen KFCs. Their saturated fat tripled. They went from eating essentially no cholesterol to a few Big Macs worth, tripled their sodium, and are now just as potassium deficient as Americans, getting less than half of the recommended minimum daily intake of 4,700 milligrams a day. In 2 generations, Okinawans have gone from the leanest Japanese to the fattest. As a consequence, there's been a resurgence of interest from public health professionals in getting Okinawans to eat the Okinawan diet too.